Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Black Doctoral Network weekly web series, Conversation Starters. I'm your moderator, Fessa Longe, and I'm excited you could join us for another wonderful episode of Conversation Starters. This evening, we will be discussing the influence of social media on academic success. Facilitating this discussion are expert scholars that will share their insight on this topic. The first panelist joining us this evening is Dr. Candice Murray, who is an assistant instructor and analyst at Capella University. Her research interests focus on the experiences of Black women in predominantly white academic spaces navigating their degrees. I welcome you, Dr. Murray.
Thank you.
Thank you. The second panelist joining us this evening is Sabrina Kizzy, who is a lecturer at Borough College. She's a doctoral candidate at California Southern University. Her research interest or dissertation focuses on the perceptions of Black millennials' acceptance of mobile advertising. Welcome you, Ms. Kizzy.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you. And our third panelist joining us this evening is Janine Peoples, who is a certified health education specialist, also an executive functioning coach at North Shore Executive Functioning. She also is a PhD student in social work at Washington University in St. Louis, and her research interests focus on examining risk and protective factors associated with mental health and behavioral health outcomes from an intersectional lens among Black adolescents and emerging adults. I welcome you, Ms. Peoples.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
All right, so let's go ahead and get this conversation started and jump into our first question of the evening. So, how would you describe the relationship between social media and education? Dr. Murray.
For lack of better words, I would say it's a very unique relationship, right? There's that good and then there's the bad and that gray area when it comes to utilizing social media to help achieve academic success or achievement. We could use social media to connect with others within our field or similar research interest or just getting support that we may not be receiving, whether it's personal or in the academic space. But I think it's a very unique relationship, very interesting. Um, I feel like there's more good than bad when we look at the relationship between those two factors. But I would say it's definitely a very unique relationship between the two. But it depends on, what all goes on with that and the person, their experience with it.
Thank you, Dr. Murray. Ms. Peoples.
Yeah, I would follow up. I think at its most basic level, social media and learning looks like yielding different forms of inquiry and communication and identity connectedness, right? Like finding like-minded individuals on those platforms. I think there's also a pedagogy argument that consumers of learning learn best in a way that they can digest it in a way that feels comfortable for them. And I think sometimes that means, developmentally. So if it's adolescents, if it's college students, social media is just a huge part of that. So I think when I think of the relationship, I think it's complex, but I think we can easily ground the utility of social media and learning and really just tie it back to learning theories.
Thank you, Ms. Peoples. And Ms. Kizzy.
Yes, I would just like to follow up. I mean, basically, with social media, it's really about sharing ideas and thoughts through virtual communities. And I believe, too, that it's very unique, but it's also a great opportunity for students to find useful information, to collaborate with others, and to network with others. And as an instructor myself, I've been teaching social media for the last 8 years, and I've seen the evolution over the period of time. and where instructors now are really incorporating more social media. In fact, I was just reading a study that instructors use video sites just like YouTube um, frequently. Actually, that's the second most popular social media app that instructors use is video platforms, because sometimes students really enjoy that visual aspect when you have a topic that you want to explain and they're able to see it in that format. So to everyone's point, I do find that it's unique, and it brings so many different benefits, as well as it could be a distraction at sometimes, and often students ability to interact with others that are not socially, connected with academia.
No, thank you all for just highlighting that key important factor that there definitely is a relationship between social media and education. So, honing more into the academic piece of it, how does social media impact academic achievement? Ms. Peoples.
Yeah, I know Ms. Kinsey just talked about a study. I was looking at a study too that was actually conducted in China, but I thought it was very interesting. A 2017 study that found it was kind of a randomized control trial, not to get too sciencey, but it was a case control, whatever. And what they found was when they allowed their adolescent Chinese students to informally practice their English speaking on social media, those individuals significantly became more fluent in English compared to the control group, who essentially just didn't go through the intervention. And so, I hadn't necessarily thought about it from that lens of this informal way to learn another language. I also see it come up when I had a student tell me, so I coach mostly high school and college students, and tell me their final project was a TikTok video. And the goal of the TikTok video was to collaborate with peers, and somebody was the producer, somebody was the writer, somebody was the content expert, and their final project was, instead of submitting a paper, was to submit a video, and they found it really good results. So I've seen it show up in real life, and I think it's really good to hold on to those real life experiences of how social media is really showing up in the classroom.
No, thank you, Ms. Peoples, for those examples and that research study. Dr. Murray.
So, in a different lens, my actual dissertation study, my participants said they utilized social media to connect with others that look like them, have shared experiences, relied on them for support while they are pursuing their degree, whether it was bachelor's or a doctorate level. They stated that social media played such a huge part in connecting them with those who actually understood the challenges. For example, my study focused mostly on Black women in the United States. So having like those shared experiences, telling them, this is what you need to do, providing those additional resources that they weren't receiving at their institution from faculty or from their peers. That was really a huge factor when I was reviewing social media, was just the level of support that these participants received. So I think that has a huge impact on academic achievement as well.
No, thank you, Dr. Murray, for your literature. You're contributing to the field, so we appreciate that. Ms. Kizzy.
Yes, I would say that social media can promote good academic achievement and good student outcomes. I can give at least two examples. For example, in terms of academic achievement, if we want to think of maybe scholarships or accomplishments that were done during, your academic career, I have personally, and on a professional level, have been on social media platforms and have learned about various scholarships through social media. For example, I just was on Twitter maybe 2 years ago, and I found out about this scholarship called the Golden Woman Foundation. As a result of that, I applied for the scholarship and was fortunate enough to receive it. And that's happened to me numerous times. So I believe that social media can help in your academic achievement in terms of about finding out about the wealth of opportunities available in terms of finding out about resources. And just as mentioned before, it's a great way to collaborate and work with others who are in similar situations. We're on Facebook right now, and Facebook has billions of viewers. And I've been able to connect with different Facebook groups to connect with other doctoral learners. And it's been so helpful, extremely helpful to be with like minded people and to get different people's perspectives on their doctoral journeys.
No, thank you all for your insight. And speaking of social media, reaching out to our viewers who are tuning in to this lovely episode of Conversation Starters, please feel free to share, like, and comment and ask any questions to our wonderful scholars who are sharing their insight. And as our guests share their intellectual property, please give them their proper credentials and credit for their contributions. So, going into the next question that I have for you all is, how can social media be utilized to enhance the learning experience? Dr. Murray.
Ooh, I think in this day and age, a lot of learners are more comfortable with social media. So you see a lot of institutions incorporate those platforms that have social media like
Mhm.
environments. That way it, increases engagement and conversation on certain topics. And that's from the faculty standpoint, that's what I've noticed from being a graduate assistant to now an assistant instructor. Like, just incorporating a change to where we're seeing, certain generations, what they feel more comfortable with. We're listening to their feedback. We're utilizing videos more to help engage others. Like, if they aren't really ones to learn via like reading or writing, they can learn through different videos or different tactics to engage them that they see on social media, like TikTok. TikTok's a huge thing. So I think it definitely is changing the academic environment, whether it's in person, like brick and mortar, or if it's virtual. So that's been really, I think it's doing great things for the learning experience for the students.
No, thank you, Dr. Murray.
Yeah.
Miss Kizzy.
I think that social media can tremendously help in utilizing students' learning experience. In fact, I think it can enhance their learning outcomes. As mentioned, instructors and faculty members are using numerous social media platforms to engage with their students. They understand and recognize that students have different ways in which they like to access information. And for example, with my students, we use all different types of techniques. Again, it is a social media course. So, for example, I have some students that are international students, many of them are, and they frequently use WhatsApp in order to communicate with each other on different subjects and on different projects and things of that nature. I know another school, a community college, in which all of their students are required as part of their internship program to have a LinkedIn profile. In fact, I've been called upon to give a 3 hour lecture and really manually go with the students on how to set up their LinkedIn profile and have professional photos. In fact, they hire a professional photographer for the students because they want to make sure that they have a good photo, because you could tell a student, professional photo, and it could be something different. but but they want to ensure the success of the students because they know that recruiters are now looking at platforms like LinkedIn for their next hire. So there's so many different opportunities in which social media has been used as a learning experience within academia.
No, thank you, Miss Kizzy. Miss Peoples.
Yeah, I would say, Kizzy, I love that you brought up the professors. I think a lot of times when we talk about social media, it's from the angle of the learner and like the student of the consumer of that knowledge. But truthfully, a lot of teachers and professors are just as happy to have that complementary source of a learning tool. So they may be assigning more asynchronous work, and it's like, hey, look at this 1 hour TED talk, and then let's log onto the platform and talk about it in dialogue. And I think it really just opens the door, not just for the learners, but professors to maybe get a break a little bit, just really thinking about how to engage students differently. And I also like that you brought up LinkedIn, because I think, again, when we talk about social media, people forget that LinkedIn is included in some of these more professional sites, not just Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. So I think it's wide ranging. I think it's opportunities to remain in the e-learning landscape, and also just really help students adapt to a digital world, because that's just kind of where we are.
No, thank you, Ms. Peoples. And I just love how you all highlighted it, like Ms. Peoples stated, from a learner's perspective versus an actual faculty member's perspective, which is relatively different. So that really highlights the impact of social media on both angles. So I appreciate all the feedback and insights you all are providing. The next question, since we're talking about the learning experience, I want to go more into the changes that we've experienced since the onset of COVID, and looking at more at the e-learning experience. How does social media contribute to the e-learning landscape? Ms. Kizzy.
I would definitely say that many e-learning professionals right now are really focusing on different aspects of social media as they try to engage with their students. As someone who works at a traditional brick and mortar school, but who is an online learner for my doctoral studies, I understand the importance of being able to learn from different platforms. And there's so many different opportunities now that e-learner professionals have, that students have. I mean, one platform that I would highly recommend if people are not familiar with it, it's called Google Classroom. And Google Classroom is a free online platform. Originally, it was used primarily for educators through K to 12, but now anybody who has a Gmail account can use Google Classroom. And I use it to supplement my work with my students. And I find that people use Google Classroom when they have different groups that they want to connect with. And it's basically a platform where you can share information, projects, as an educator, assignments, and you can email each other back and forth. And that's just a great example of, using social media and using these different platforms to give students other opportunities to learn outside, their classroom setting.
No, thank you, Ms. Kizzy, and for sharing that resource. A lot of our audience members may not know of as part of the e-learning landscape. Well, we have a question, as our viewers are very engaged in this conversation. So we have a question coming from, it looks like, let's see, Charisma 001, stating that while social media is an avenue to access information around the globe, how do we ensure learners are able to determine its validity? So I'm going to select one of you all to answer that question. I can go with Dr. Murray.
Okay, so I'm thinking faculty now because I work with graduate and doctorate learners. Do your research. If you come across something on social media and they're spitting out all these facts, don't just go off the video. Literally do your research, look up how valid those points are, do your homework, and then make the decision on your own if this is valid or it's not. That's as simply as I could put it. That's what I keep emphasizing, as well as the other instructors I work with. Make sure you're doing your research and you know what's real, what's, published, peer review, all of that. Do your homework. Other than that, if there's things that aren't adding up and just like contradicting points, chances are it's not valid. So
No, thank you, Dr. Murray. And I
that's
think
pretty
that's
good.
no, I think that's a very good question and great response as we know that there's so much information overload on the internet. So no, definitely thank you for your feedback to that question. So going back to our original question with regard to the e-learning experience, what are your thoughts, Ms. Peoples?
Yeah, I was just I have a lot of these like recent experiences. I keep bringing up examples, but I again was literally just talking to a student who was talking about their Facebook group that's now used as a debate in a class that they're in, and so the professor has allowed them as students to come outside of the classroom. They've created a private group on Facebook, and they have live debates. They have live sessions similar to what we're doing right now. But they also have in one place a group for private members with links and resources and comments that you don't really get in the classroom setting. And so when I think about how, for instance, on Facebook, how Facebook shows up in e-learning, I feel like consumers get to make it their own. I feel like students get to make it their own, and maybe in a platform that they get to like be with people who are more like-minded. Maybe it's very a substantive area that's very specific. So I think it's very, very relevant. I know we'll probably talk about some disadvantages, so I'll save those. But I really I see social media as a tool. If it's utilized in a healthy manner, it really works for students. And myself being a student, I also engage on these different apps differently, and it's been really productive.
Well, thank you, Ms. People. Dr. Murray, do you have anything to add to this question?
I I don't actually. This People's actually said it perfectly, especially with me being so new to the PhD life. Social media has definitely been very, very beneficial when I was a student as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. So we were talking of like Ms. People said, now is the time to highlight the other side of social media. Now we've glorified it. So the next question that I have for you all is, what are some advantages and disadvantages of utilizing social media in academia? Ms. Peoples.
I'm going to start with the positive. So going off the advantages, and I know I'll probably, so as a researcher, probably the most like junior researcher out of all of us, but I have found it really helpful as a recruitment tool for in academia. So I think it's really been really beneficial so far to reach wider segments of the population. So if, for instance, if I just recently we're like doing a study on depression and social media and what that interaction looks like. And by being able to recruit on Reddit and Instagram and TikTok and Facebook, I mean, you really can just identify eligible participants a lot quicker. So I see it show up very frequently as on the researcher side of things. And I think that's just a huge advantage for my own kind of life as a researcher and then as a student, all the reasons that I've already kind of shared, but I think that's probably a new one that I just to add about the research side of things and what social media does to help recruit participants for research.
Well, thank you, Ms. Peoples. Ms. Kizzy, what are your thoughts?
Well, I teach social media, so I normally say that I always like to share the good, the bad, and the ugly about social media. And so I'll start off with the negative and then end on the positive. But in terms of negative aspects of social media, what I find is it can definitely weaken students' ability to have critical thinking because sometimes they use, the internet as a crutch. I'll just Google it. Also, too, in writing skills, we're so used to texting with slang and shorthand that sometimes that shows up in our writing. I often get teased because my texts are long and everything is spelled out correctly, but I don't want to, ever make that mistake in my formal writing and have slang words in it.
Right.
And then in addition to that, I would say, you know, to be truthful, there's cyberbullying, And then too much social media can really have a negative impact on your mental health. And that's the truth. It can cause depression, it can cause anxiety. And I find that many people, individuals, students, they look at social media as a measurement tool. They'll look at what other people are doing and then they compare their lives to other people. And we all have a different journey. So you can't compare what you're doing versus what someone else is doing. And I see this a lot in my students. So I think those are some of the negative aspects of social media. But I think social media is very helpful with in academia in moderation. Everything is in moderation. So it's good with, as just formally mentioned, with data collection. I cannot tell you how extremely helpful it has been in terms of my data collection for my dissertation. I mean, the Facebook groups, LinkedIn, total complete strangers that I've met on social media really went to bat for me with my data collection. And they would just reshare my information and then check back with me. How many more participants do you need? How many more? And it was just wonderful. So from just to your point, as from a researcher point of view, social media is very helpful, but it helps in so many different ways in terms of networking with other people, collaboration, and just learning new ideas.
No, thank you, Miss Kizzy, for your feedback and insight. Dr. Murray.
I agree with what both of them have stated. Researcher wise, great tool to utilize when you're recruiting for a study. That's actually how I got my participants for my study. A disadvantage I would say is depending on the type of group that you're recruiting in, you may get some unsolicited advice. It happened to me. Um, One actually had the idea that I didn't have IRB approval. I didn't take the necessary steps to get the flyer approved, to get my study approved. So just having like that assumption, and I did respond like, well, everything is in place. So just that's another disadvantage when you're being proactive, trying to get your participants, get your sampling done so you can start data collection and move forward with your study. You have others who feel that they know your entire process, they know your study, they don't know your study, you know your study. So having to constantly like stand your ground depending on how you may feel that day, because we pick and choose our battles. I chose to battle that day, but I'm just saying, but that's a disadvantage, is people trying to tell you how to do your study that you've never even had a conversation with. But I will say a huge advantage is being able to connect with others, and just build out your network, get that support. I've made quite a few friends in the academic space through social media who actually we finished our PhDs around the same time as each other. So just being a support system also helped. So those are my advantages and disadvantages when it comes to social media with academia.
No, thank you, Dr. Murray. And Miss Peoples.
Yeah, I just wanted to finally share my disadvantage. I actually have two big main ones. And so earlier, Kizzy mentioned bullying, but it really made me think of the political and social climate and what we see from a university standpoint, because I've worked in universities, of when people can anonymously or maybe openly, share racist or violent or explicit content, what that does for the mental health of students. And then sometimes it's very tailored to a university. I'm thinking of college students, of there may be racist remarks about a particular racial and ethnic minority group at that university. And now students have to show up on campus, and they're supposed to thrive and show up in the classroom, and you can't stop it. Like, I think universities try to put certain protective measures in place, and they say that they do their due diligence in trying to figure out where it came from. But as people are getting more comfortable vocalizing their true thoughts, it really is having an impact on students' mental health. And I've seen that a lot, and it makes it hard for students to show up in the classroom. And then you have competition that leads to perfectionism and imposter syndrome, and just the constant comparison of self to other people, and how it kind of reduces confidence in your ability to show up as a student. And so unfortunately, I think, both of those would fall into the disadvantage category.
No, thank you, Ms. Peoples, for adding those disadvantages. And no, this thank you all in general about really highlighting, like, although social media is this wonderful thing and evolution tool that we have, it does definitely have adverse effects on the learning experience in people. So definitely thank you all for that. So moving into our next question, how can social media facilitate collaboration between academic institutions and community organizations? Ms. Kizzy.
That's a great question. I just see so many opportunities for collaboration. Um, I am a strong believer in that it is possible to build relationships via social media.
Mhm.
And people, when I say the word network, they cringe because they think that's a bad word, but it's not. Like I have really networked with people via Twitter, Instagram. And so I see in via Twitter and these different social media platforms where it might be a postdoc in one lab who's collaborating with another postdoc in another lab, and they're just exchanging information via Twitter or through different groups and whatnot. So I just see such a strong connection and potential for people to collaborate among different institutions and different community organizations. And that is very helpful because I notice when we work together as a group, I might have a certain skill set, your organization might have another skill set, and we can work together. And at the end of the day, if we're doing something that's going to improve and foster good relationships with our students, have better outcomes for our students, why not? And why not facilitate that through social media?
No, thank you, Ms. Kizzy. And Dr. Murray.
I was going to say, from what I've seen, we could use social media to hold institutions accountable
Yes.
for certain things. Students may not feel comfortable sending, an email to the dean or to the president or whoever it may be that's over a certain area. But if we really look at it, a lot of students, whether they're alumni or they're current students or future students, they are making their voices and concerns heard on social media and holding those institutions accountable. So I think that's a huge thing when they're looking to do better instead of just sending out, messages. We don't tolerate X, Y, and Z, but now it's out there. Now the whole world can see it. So what are you going to do to, provide a more inclusive environment for your students and your faculty and staff?
No, thank you, Dr. Murray. And Ms. Peoples.
Yeah, I was going to say along those same lines, where even if you almost could take social media out of it with what I'm about to say, but on those same lines as Dr. Murray is making sure universities are pouring back into the organizations they pull from. So, like I'm in the St. Louis area now. And, one thing that's really big on is don't go into a community organization if they don't know you, if they don't trust the institution, if they have, you really have to build rapport with these organizations and not just pull data from them or not just do research, but what are you pouring back into them? Mm-hmm. And so then I almost think of it from that lens of how institutions can be more intentional about helping organizations. I think of a lot of nonprofit and smaller organizations who may not even have as much access to social media, or I think about the underserved communities they are serving. So we may post flyers on Instagram and LinkedIn and all these sites, but do their patients have access to that? Do their clients have access to that? Do they have laptops? Do they have internet, right? So I almost am getting into health disparities at this point, but just thinking about communication disparities. And I think academic institutions could be really integral in pouring into some of these smaller organizations that serve underserved communities.
No, thank you, Ms. Peoples. And no, thank you all for really conceptualizing and answering that question the way you have, because, a lot of people don't see that connection. And I appreciate you all for really, highlighting that. Well, this has concluded the questions that I have for you all this evening. But I do have one more question to ask you all before we go. It is, how has your affiliation with the Black Doctoral Network helped to enhance you personally and or professionally? Miss Peoples.
Yeah, so I am still relatively new to this network, and something that I'm really excited about is the upcoming writing retreat that is virtual. It really just gives students and writers a dedicated space to come and be in community with other people with similar goals. So that's something that I definitely am taking advantage of. Honestly, opportunities like this to have deep conversations about meaningful topics. And then I also like that there are different divisions within the Black Doctoral Network. So as a woman of color, particularly a Black woman, I know that I can be in community with other scholars who are challenging systems and who are looking at inequality, race, and gender. And I've found different ways to do that within the network. So that's been really important to me so far.
No, thank you, Ms. Peoples, and welcome to the Black Doctoral Network. And I hope
Thank
that you
you.
enjoy your affiliation and definitely networking opportunities. Ms.
Yes.
Kizzy.
I have been a member of the Black Doctoral Network since 2019, and I really cannot emphasize how enormously helpful being part of this group has been for me professionally. Last year, I attended the virtual conference, and I was just such a wealth of information that I received, and I was able to connect with so many people. In fact, I almost connected with every speaker via LinkedIn, since we're talking about social media, and just connected with them and let them know, share with them, because I took great notes on what I learned from their session. So it's helped me in terms of the information I received from the conference, being able to build my network of people from the organization that have been extremely helpful. And as I just mentioned recently, the organization has been extremely helpful with my data collection. When I reached out to say, can I put my survey on your platform? It was out without hesitation. They said absolutely. And everybody has been such a great support system, the organization, in terms of being a resource, in terms of advice, knowledge, insight. So, I mean, I can just go on, and I really feel fortunate that I'm part of this group, and I actually wish I knew about it earlier in my doctoral journey. So,
Thank you, Ms. Kizzy, for your continued membership. And Dr. Murray.
I have made so many connections within the network. Some are actually my accountability partners, whether it is school related, work related, fitness related. I've made some great connections. And I also love when we have the workshop series, just hearing and viewing the workshops and taking away tools to become like a better version of me in all these different spaces, or to make sure my resume is good, my CV is good. I love everything that this group has provided and continues to provide, and the networking events are really fun as well, so it's always a good time.
No, thank you, Dr. Murray, for your dedication and your continued membership. Well, before we go, I wanted the audience members to find out different ways to connect with you all in case they have questions regarding this topic or any other relevant topic. So I would ask you all just to share some of your contact information. Ms. Peoples.
Yeah, I can be best reached on LinkedIn, and I would say just first name, last name. So Janiene, last name Peoples, Peoples. So I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn.
Thank you. And Miss Kizzy.
Yes, I can also be reached on LinkedIn at Sabrina Kizzy, Kizzie. I can also be reached on Instagram and Twitter under the handle Sabrina on Move, SabrinaOnMove. And my website is socialmediaglamour.com.
Thank you, Miss Kizzy. And Dr. Murray.
Yes, you can reach me on Instagram. It will be at the Student for Life, and also on my website, thestudentforlife.org.
No, thank you all for taking time out this evening to share your insight on this wonderful topic. Our audience members have thoroughly enjoyed this topic and just really highlighting social media as a whole and its connection to academic success. If you've enjoyed Conversation Starters and would like to keep up to date with the latest BDN developments, please be sure to check us out on blackphdnetwork.org and become a member, or follow us on Facebook at Black Doctoral Network. Please be sure to share this live session with your friends, family, and professional networks. I am your moderator, Fesse Longe. See you next time and have a good evening.